taking all of these justifications slash excuses slash explanations into account, what would you do on contrails if you had an airline?
Yes, I'm sure no one will put me in charge of an airline with my current attitude on it. But um, the the first, and probably no surprise based on our conversation. The first is I think if I was running an airline for a variety of reasons, both from a moral perspective, but actually also for if you want an airline to exist in the long run, not just in the next 12 months, I would be participating in trials actively. I would actually be working hard to try and go as far as we possibly can, setting up trials, participating, working with scientists and engineers that are working on that problem. So I think that's the biggest thing that airlines can do in the short term. The other, that would be a very large thing. One thing that perhaps we haven't talked about as much today is that I believe that if a member of the public or a customer is buying a ticket, they have a right to know what the impact of that ticket is. And that's both business travelers, tourist travelers, leisure travelers, and freight, which is another significant business sector for aviation. And so I therefore think there is an obligation, whether it's cast down in law in all jurisdictions, to be open with the public about our environmental impact. And we have seen this in other sectors. So the tech sector has obviously made much more stringent environmental commitments. We can argue about how sanguine or otherwise they are about them, but I would say there are some sectors that are much more open about their environmental impact than the aviation sector. And I think that applies both to CO2 and non-CO2. Today, it's actually very difficult to get an accurate measurement of the CO2 impact of your flight, even though the airlines know very precisely what the CO2 impact is of an individual flight, because obviously airlines know exactly what fuel they've loaded onto every aircraft, and exactly how much they fuel, they actually know how much they burn minute by minute on an aircraft, and they know exactly what the payload is on an aircraft. So airlines do know full well precisely what the impact of that is. The impact of non-CO2 is much less certain, and we have to be, we would need to be open about that. But without measuring your impact accurately, there's a classic narrative in science of, you can't improve something really unless you measure it, or it's much more difficult to improve something unless you measure it. Famously, the best thing you can do to lose weight is actually just to weigh yourself, right? That, without that, it's actually, you might lose weight, but it's very difficult to know what's working and what's not working. So, measuring impact and being open with the public about that, I think is very important. And I think that the public and customers actually have a right to know what that impact is. That might be more difficult to justify to shareholders in the short term, but I think the winds of change on the legislation will happen anyway in the long run. So it's kind of degree of preparedness. And to me, it would be a kind of cultural issue within an airline that, we are open with our customers about that.